IFLA World and IFLA Africa executives, council members, our AAK president, the AAK Governing Council, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this second part series of our three-part series webinar. This is a collaboration between Sweden and Kenya, and this has been a journey that started in 2018. And part of these activities are towards the 2023 IFLA World Congress. I now call upon our AAK President, Architect Mujeri to give us the opening remarks. Karibu, Madam President.
Thank you so much, Ruth, for that kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I know it's also just become afternoon in Sweden as well. I have the privilege to welcome you on behalf of the Architectural Association of Kenya. I'd firstly like to appreciate and acknowledge a number of the persons who have made today happen. The Landscape Architects Chapter Chair, Ambrose Ofafa, Asante Sana, IFLA World President, James Hato, IFLA Africa President, Carrie Duncan, Director of Architects Sweden, Tobias Olsson, Chairperson of Architects Sweden, Emina Kovakik, Kenyan landscape architects, and all the other professionals who are joining us both from Kenya and Sweden, and also particularly Union to Union, who have supported this partnership for a long time, Asanteni and Karibuni. Just to put in terms of context who AAK is the leading built environment professional association in Kenya. The name suggests that we are just architects, but really we are a holistic representation of the built environment. We have architects, landscape architects, town planners, construction project managers, environmental design consultants, engineers, quantity surveyors. So we're in a very unique position to be able to offer a sort of a collaborative view of the built environment. And in that spirit of the collaboration, this collaboration between Sweden and Kenya started back in 2018 when AAK and Architects Sweden successfully bid to host IFLA World Congress 2021, which of course has now been pushed to 2023 because of coronavirus. Since then, the two associations have really had a series of collaborative events. This is the second of a three-part webinar series, and this really does continue that collaborative journey. I do want to sincerely thank all the panelists, all those who will be speaking to us here today. There are some fantastic expertise here from the Kenyan side. Professor Mujeri Asante, Hitesh Mehta Asante, landscape architect Robert Karaoke. We appreciate your voices in this conversation. And really to the Landscape Architects Chapter for how they've continued to grow the chapter in terms of numbers. With those very few words, ladies and gentlemen, as we say here in Kenya, karibuni to this conversation, and we look forward to a very good engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Architect Mujeri Jendo. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Ruth Wanjiko. I shall be the moderator of this session. And this afternoon, we shall have four speakers who shall speak on various aspects of the landscape architect's profession. We shall also have Swedish counterparts who shall give us the Swedish perspective of the presentation. So we shall have a Kenyan presenter and a Swedish counterpart who will give a short reflection of the presentation. And then we shall have a Q&A session at the end of all presentations. So you can kindly type in your questions and feedback into the chat box. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. So our first speaker is no stranger to those who have trained in Kenya as landscape architects, Professor Philip Mujeri. We had the privilege of being tutored by him at Jomo Kenyatta University. So Professor Mujeri was the Chancellor of Masai Mara University between 2013 and 2018. He holds a Bachelor's of Architecture degree from University of Nairobi, a Master's of Landscape Architecture, and a Doctor of Philosophy in Environmental Planning from the University of California, Berkeley. He founded IFLA African Region, the Department of Architecture in Jomo Kenyatta, that was in 1990, the School of Architecture and Building Sciences in 2001, and the Department of Landscape Architecture at Jomo Kenyatta University. His firm, Content Design, undertakes work in architecture, landscape architecture, and environmental planning and urban design. He's an AAK fellow and is an EIA lead expert, and was awarded the Doctor of Science honors from Masai Mara University in 2013. And he has a Gold Award Excellence in Academic category and Construction Industry Award of Excellence by the Architectural Association of Kenya. He's an avid researcher in both applied and pure research. Welcome, Professor. Karibu, Professor. Kindly unmute. So just before
now you can hear. Now you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Karibu.
As I said, thanks to everybody for making this occasion successful. I'll carry you through the PowerPoint presentation. And as I said, my name, I don't have to repeat again. Where is the next one? I think it is always good to appreciate those who come before us, just as you have done. And my journey started at the University of Nairobi, and there was a landscape architect, a lady called Gruton Hughes. She is the one who nurtured me to landscape architecture. Her husband worked for UNEP, but she was practicing and teaching at the same time. And she was giving input of landscape architecture in the training of architects, where I did from 74 to 79. Now, after my training, I went back to teach as a tutorial fellow. But even that time, one has to be vetted, and we were vetted, and we were given whatever we were given. After that history came the necessity of trading, which I did at Bakri. After training, then we came to what do you do with whatever you have trained? And when I came back, I found there was a lot of energy in trying to push for the establishment of landscape architecture in the region, not just in Kenya, in the region. And if IFLA was at the forefront, as it were, they held 2 meetings in Malawi. They held meetings in Kenya, and they were all pushing for establishment of landscape architecture. In addition, we found out that all international local funded projects were being funded on condition they would bring a landscape architect on board. We also did a lot of library search personally, and I found out that for the animal wild in Kenya, that conservation coexists, they were bringing on board external landscape architects because they did not have local ones. The AAK at that time had also established the chapter, meaning it had found the value for landscape architects to be on board. The economy of Kenya was growing around that time. And you know, the middle income and the high income, they value services of landscape architects. And therefore, there was a growing market, although not that fast. And finally, there was only 2 professional firms in Kenya at that time. And in my own opinion, they were not meeting the demand, particularly the demand from internationally funded jobs. And therefore, there was a clear demand of training landscape architects in the region, not just in Kenya. For me, the journey again was, it was easier to push for establishment of the department from within where I was the chairman of the department. And that is why, even though University of Nairobi is the oldest university in Kenya, I could not start the program there because I was based at JKUAT. And to be at JKUAT, the first thing was to start architecture. And that was the second oldest department of architecture in Kenya. So after I started the department, and that was in 1990, we were put together with engineers. And we were not able really, I cannot say we were 100% cohesive. And therefore, architects started the journey of freeing themselves, so to speak. So we started our own School of Architecture and Building Sciences in 2000. And that is when now landscape architecture came on board, because we needed new programs to start the School of Architecture and Building Sciences. So landscape architecture in Kenya started in academic year 2001 to 2002. Establishing the department required syllabus. And the syllabus was not very easy to develop if there were no personnel. But fortunately, IFLA, through the two conferences, one in Malawi, one in Nairobi, they had prepared a syllabus skeleton outline which can be used in the region. Also, my master's MLA was on landscape architecture syllabus in Kenya. So there was syllabus which had been prepared prior and which was very relevant to the situation. The only differing thing between my syllabus and that of IFLA tilted towards what you may call specialization options in the final year. But me, given my experience in the region, I thought you don't need to specialize at that point, because when you go to the farm, whether architectural or landscape or urban design, you will be required to give all the services. That was the logic. But all the other aspects, the objectives, what you are trying to achieve, were all the same, whether from my syllabus or from that one of IFLA. And therefore, we started, because of that concept of not specializing in the final year, we started with a 5-year syllabus. The intake was not very promising, the first one, because we only got 9 students, but we managed to retain them all the way to the end of the year. And we managed to grow the number, that number gradually, as we shall see. But before we go to how the number has grown, we did invite IFLA to come for accreditation. And when the IFLA came, that was 2006, they identified what we may call the challenges and opportunities of our program. Mainly what they identified were challenges. And the challenges span from, we did not have a requirement to have 3 landscape architects specialists within the department teaching. I was the only one that time. We lacked library resources, we lacked technology resources, and even in the space, we lacked the space. So we had to embark on trying to bring on board a system that will enable us to have landscape architects enough number for us to be accredited. Otherwise, all the other aspects, IFLA was very comfortable with. The only one we could not fulfill is having 3 members of teaching staff within the department. And therefore, IFLA was very comforting and very encouraging, and we embarked on that journey of reviewing our syllabus and our status so that we realize whatever they wanted so that we can be accredited. And to do that, we had now to challenge our syllabus and come up with the 844 syllabus, which was basically bringing on board the 4-year syllabus on board. The 4 syllabus on board has given us several opportunities because we have brought on board the PhD program. Now we have PhD program. We have brought master's program on board, and we have brought postgraduate diploma programs on board, and we have brought other programs like environmental planning on board. But there are still other challenges which we still need to address. And those challenges are apparently we are performing very well in theory, but when we come to technical courses, we are struggling behind. We are still not yet perfect in terms of sketch presentation, that is sketch graphics. And when it comes to studio processes, design processes, we need to up the game according to those challenges identified. But also we need to maintain the performance and continue improving as compared to what is happening. The student population, there are 2 types of population which maybe we need to mention. One is the actual population and the other one is the graduating population. The one for the total population of the students, we have been doing very well. We started with 9, as I said, in the year 2001, 2002. And by 2013, 2014, we had a population of 289 students who have been taken. But don't confuse this number, because this number includes even those who transfer later. These are applicants and then admitted automatically, showing the popularity of your program. However, that number slowed down when we changed from 5-year syllabus to 4-year syllabus. And in 2015, 2016, we had 125 students admitted as compared to 2020, 2021, where we have 220 students admitted. When we come to the graduation, the first lot of 9 graduated, 7 of them. The population has continued to grow as indicated. The highest population we have graduated one sitting is 2016, and we had 30 graduates. Basically, of late, we are graduating on average between 25 and 29. The teaching methodology, we are studio-based. Basically, we are studio-based, and all the theory courses that we offer are meant to assist the students to appreciate their studio work. There are other elements. This is program, project programs, attachments, practical courses in the workshops, but basically we are studio-based. Quality maintenance, we have tried to maintain our quality, and that's why IFLA, even our local accreditation organizations, AAK and our chapter and BOLAX are happy. And we have been using the following in order to ensure we maintain our quality. One of the things we started with is what we call full-time equivalent staff formula from day one. That time we used the UNESCO one, which is 1 member of teaching staff for 8 students. But the Jomo Kenyatta has also developed their own formula, which I will not go into detail. It's a complicated one. It has so many parameters, but it has given us a total number of staff of that one as establishment of the department. The second factor we have been using so that we maintain quality, we have to admit within what Jomo Kenyatta parameters allow. In terms of cluster of subjects, we offer program to students who have done one language, passed in 2 sciences, and passed in social sciences or technical courses like art and building, design, drawing, and design. And then the University Placement Board, nationally, they have their own cutoff point. So we have to be within that as a way of keeping the quality, maintaining the quality. Then we have Jomo Kenyatta, that is JKUAT, is ISO certified. And with the ISO certification, it means you have systems of evaluating whether you are delivering what you promise to deliver. Are you delivering the goals you promise to deliver at a departmental level, at a faculty level, at a university level? And finally, as I said, AAK, BORAX, and IFLA, they keep us on check. And therefore, using all those parameters, we are able to maintain our quality. Finally, what is the future for us? One, the future for us is we need to market ourselves within JKUAT. And we started that sometime back 2001 to 2002 when we established the department. And as my paper will show, it was not a walkover because you awaken other departments who feel they needed to fill that niche. And those departments were botany and horticulture. And they happened to have support from the highest offices, but eventually we won. The other one which we used to advertise ourselves within Jomo Kenyatta, we wrote a proposal, me and 2 technicians, on how to establish a botanical garden. Eventually, that botanical garden was realized through Chinese collaboration. But again, when you talk of botany, botanical garden, people tend to associate you more with botany than landscape architecture. However, the botanical garden is proving to be very, very important and very valuable when it comes to teaching plant ID. From there, we did take the journey of advertising ourselves in a way that connects the real projects and the studio within Jomo Kenyatta, so that they also know what the difference is between those who wanted to host landscape architecture and us. And we did a master plan, and from the master plan, the university was kind enough to implement 2 projects. The third one is really stalled. So in a sense, at the university now, they know what a landscape architect can do in the open spaces for the use of the students and the staff. Then we needed to bridge the gap between hypothetical projects in studios and real world. And that one, we had to go out of our comfort zone, campaign through counties, campaign through individual private clients, and we have managed to have certain projects that have been done through the business arm of the university called JKUAT through our Department of Landscape Architecture. So our students can relate what is happening in the studio. They can also relate what is happening in out there where they can earn a living. But still we have what I'm calling short-term areas we need to act on. And these short-term areas which we need to act on is to seize the opportunities and implement certain programs that will enable us to be slightly better than we are today. I had already mentioned some of them. That is mode of presentation of our student work, highlighting what external examiners have highlighted we need to improve on. So we need to act on what I'm calling short-term as well as long-term. And the long-term is, as we move on, I see a situation where we cannot run away now from specializing in options in the last year, final year, because the market is now appreciating whom we are and the diversity of what we can bring on board. So in real sense, in the long term, we need now to start going where initially I thought we cannot reach. Then we need to think of linkages and exchange of programs. And I'm happy that we are here today talking, because this is the way of tomorrow. And we have done a few things in this direction, although we have not realized it fully. The department is in consultation with the University of Addis Ababa along these lines, University of Pretoria along these lines, and University of Hanover along these lines. Finally, we need to up our game on research and publications as a department, so that internationally we relate well with the academicians elsewhere. But it is not all lost. We have staff members who are funded through like Landscape Foundation US, so that they can do a postgraduate program which can lead them into PhD. We have also sponsorship from Japan, again, for our staff members who are trying to pursue PhD program. We are participating in Africa Journal of Landscape Architects, which will be published soon. And finally, we are internally sensitizing each other so that we can form a board that can allow us to achieve what we want to achieve. That is references, it's okay. But thanks to webinar for giving me that chance. And thank you to the chairman and his team of the Department of Landscape Architecture. All the data which I'm using came from that office. And thanks for the participants for listening to me. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. That was quite an informative presentation. And I would like to call our Swedish counterpart, who is going to just give a brief perspective of what Prof has presented. I'm going to introduce Louise Dadrickson, who is a landscape architect and an urban designer who has experience across 5 continents. She's also a senior lecturer in urban design and planning at Chalmers Technical University in Sweden. She's a partner at White Architecture and the head of business development in East Africa, and is currently working on local physical development plans in Kisumu County. Welcome, Louise.
Thank you very much, Ruth. And thank you, Professor Mujeri. That was a very good introduction for how the development has been in Kenya for landscape architects. And I think you're saying you're celebrating 20 years now then.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I have to say it's very interesting to hear someone speaking about how you have to break new grounds and can't be easy to be at that frontier, but you have lots to celebrate down the road as you presented. So well done. And I'm not gonna do the same for this the Swedish perspective and going back in history and so on, but there's a few things, there's lots to discuss, but a few things that I picked up on. I think, for instance, the way that the society changes and that the education is following. I think there's different ways of approaching the change, and that as well as we have to tie in with what the market is asking for, and you say that it's maturing now, and there's demand, then at the same time the university has such an important role to steer everything ahead and guide with new thinking and innovation. So it's like a tough job to both be at the forefront and educating and spreading information to all these different decision makers and clients, and at the same time keeping the skill sets going, knowing that the students will be employed and when they graduate. And then we have all this bigger picture also to deal with all the global goals and challenges that are thrown at us with what's happened the past year. So there's many things that we have to deal with at the same time. And I like to talk about the triple helix, innovation, kind of networking as a good way of trying to do all of these things at the same time. When the government, the industry, and the academia forms good partnerships to help each other to move faster and in a clearer direction together. So that's something it would be interesting to hear more about. And you mentioned that you started the studio work in collaboration with government, counties, and councils, and I think that's a really good way forward when you get these win-win effects in all these aspects. And of course, there's a big challenge when you have to have qualified staff. And I understand from other conversations that it's important to have PhD students, PhD qualified staff. I mean, opportunities now that we see opening up with everything that we learned during this past year, how we do e-learning as a standard, I think there are many ways that we can help across nations and universities to educate and exchange. So it's not only been negative effects during the past year. I think we learned a lot. What else should I mention? There's always challenges, as you say, with getting skill sets as sketching going. I think that's a general trend that it's decreasing because we have so many students working directly with sketching in the computer. So if we talk about hand sketches and computer, it's a big change over the last 20 years when I think it's going more and more into digital tools. And do we need to keep the pen in the hand skill going, building models and so on, or are we going to be inside the computers all the time? Good question. What else? How many minutes? Maybe I should. What do you think, Ruth? Should I wrap up here?
Yes.
Okay.
Kindly. All right. Thank you, Louise, for that reflection. And We hope Prof can respond to that at the end on whether we need to continue using our hands. But I would like to, in the interest of time, I would like to introduce our second presenter, who's going to talk about private practice. So we'll move from the classroom and go to the field and see how the two have been linked. So our second presenter is Robert Karaoke, the landscape architect. So he's one of the pioneer landscape architects in Kenya. And he was one of the founder members of the AAK Landscape Architects Chapter. He's also an AAK fellow. He has developed, he has been a key partner in the development of the profession and has also served as an external examiner for the Department of Landscape Architecture in JKUAT. His firm, Lariak Landscapes, has undertaken numerous projects in Kenya and across the region. Welcome, Mr. Karaoke.
Thank you very much for having me. And privileged, I feel privileged to be part of this and to talk about the profession of landscape architecture in this country. Technically, if I may start, is that the profession of landscape architecture in this country really started in a very difficult manner. And it's important for me to first of all mention some of the people who were involved at the beginning when it was difficult. There were people like Professor Gonjiri, Melanie Richards, Gruttenhouse, Hitesh Mehta, and this was the beginning. There were and there have been landscape architects who have been involved in the process of actually doing implementation. Of course, in the colonial time, we had people like Peter Greensmith, who actually worked on the roundabouts around Nairobi and did a bit of planting, but he was not a landscape architect. But during the period when we did not have any landscape architects who are local, I think Professor Gonjiri went off to California and graduated from UCLA with a Master of Landscape Architecture. I believe in landscape architect. I believe in pedagogy was part of the important part of his engagement. And he came in with Mehta, who later also joined us. And we started trying to make landscape architecture a form of profession. I must say that it has been almost 30 years since that time. And we have developed to the point where we say we are training landscape architects, and I believe we have about 300 landscape architects who have actually graduated from Jomo Kenyatta University. And again, when we talk about the profession, you cannot divorce yourself from the idea of pedagogy and teaching the profession. And I give credit to Professor Gonjiri, having been instrumental and left the University of Nairobi and moved on to Jomo Kenyatta, where he was instrumental in beginning the Department of Landscape Architecture. Of course, it has been a long drive because after that, the profession has sort of taken off. Really, when we talk about landscape architecture in this country, it's a very new profession. 30 years or 40 years is a very short time. There were pioneers such as Gruttenhouse and Melanie Richards who had been practicing, and obviously it was still a very new idea in the 80s. But around 1991, we were accepted into into the Architectural Association of Kenya, which began the formalization of landscape architecture as a profession. Of course, there's still a lot that is still pending to be done, and that is the issue of registration through government. And because when you're in the Architectural Association, technically, we are just members of a professional body that is a membership that is of a professional body that actually accepts. And we had to look for 10 people in order to start the first chapter when we began, and that was with members co-opted from the Architectural Association of Kenya to make the first 10 members. After that, then, because that's not the area that I'm actually talking about, is a profession. The profession has gone through what I would call a metamorphosis from practitioners who are actually self-taught or have a passion for landscape, and they were really gardeners, if you want to call it that, because we did not have any designers at the time. And as a result, it was very difficult for other professions to actually accept landscape architecture as a profession that is distinct and that actually contributes to the process of development, whether you look at urban or rural development. And I recall, even in my own time, that some architects found it very difficult to even refer to landscape architects as landscape architects, because they technically referred to us as gardeners or the landscaper. And now is when credence is starting to be appreciated in this process, where just in the last 10 to 15 years, we started receiving or seeing a development where landscape architects are required in projects. In Kenya, traditionally, design build has been the norm, not because people do not want to do pure practice, but because it's because the environment has not appreciated that you can do design, pure design, without actually doing the implementation. And I recall it was very difficult to actually carry out consultancy without something that people could see as a tangible element of landscape architecture implementation. People wanted to see the actual planting. People did not appreciate very much just the drawings. And we have moved far, because currently most of the landscape architectural firms and then younger landscape architects who are practicing is out of practicality that they are actually doing it, not out of probably choice. It's because to survive in this environment, really you need to carry out design and build, because the market itself seems to demand design and build, because many clients do not want just to see drawings. However, when I talk at the regional level, Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda, and in the region, yes, it is possible to carry out pure consultancy services, because most of those are actually sought from Nairobi, because that's where we have now a substantial number of landscape architects who are actually practicing. And the regional countries have actually been sourcing for landscape architects from Kenya, because they do not have very many of them. we have seen the advent of South African landscape architects, because they do have a more developed culture for landscape architecture. And we are seeing also the influx of landscape architectural firms in Kenya. So we can say that there is a developmental element that has come in, which has changed the way landscape architecture is being practiced. And one of the new and more recent changes is that we are finding that more corporate members have been requesting for pure landscape architectural services, especially in the last 5 years or so, where they say, because of conflict of interest, they would like a landscape architect to provide pure consultancy, and we go into tender, where we have other landscape architects who are practicing design and build, actually getting involved at the level of tendering and implementation. This is a new development in the last 5 or so years, where we are starting to see clients, and I am saying especially the corporate clients, starting to demand pure consultancy services that are tendered out and actually implemented. I think that is a significant development in the practice and growth of landscape architecture in Kenya. Hopefully, in time to come, we should expect that we will see development of firms that are pure consultancy. Maybe the vice chair or the chair can tell us whether they have any new firms that are pure landscape design oriented. But in the market, most of the firms that exist are design build, especially any firm that has more than 3 practitioners. Design and build has been the norm. In this country, it's very difficult to survive without implementation as a part of landscape practice. And this has been due to the fact that the market is so small and it does not offer the diversity of professional specialization. This professional specialization has come to this country basically through larger projects, especially gated communities, where you find they are demanding, for example, golf course designers, whether it's a signature design or they look for somebody who is renowned, like to come in and carry out a design. We are aware that it's landscape architects behind the scenes that actually do the design, but we have found, and I might mention a few, such as Longonot Gate, where we had a signature golf course, Muthaiga Club, Thika Greens are part of those that have actually imported landscape architects who are specialized in golf course development. Well, that is the realm in which you find these services now coming in from South Africa in particular. I think currently the 300 or so graduates who have come out of Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology have started filling in that vacuum that exists for design and build. But specialized landscape architectural services still remain quite low in terms of provision of those services. So you find that within the practice, most of the landscape architects are actually generalists, that you embrace each and every project that comes in, regardless of whether it's residential urban, or even, for example, golf course design. And this is where I think we have not developed to the point where we have enough of ourselves who have a large practice that allows specialization. Partly, I believe, is because the market is also not that large for specialized sort of inputs. And in a nutshell, it is hoped that currently the economy has slowed down and it's getting harder, if I may say, based on the practice that I have, where I'm employing close to 200 people. I find that I'm now laying off because since COVID, the industry is shrinking. And it's shrinking because most of the services we provide at the level of maintenance and implementation is to hospitality. When I talk about hospitality, I'm talking about hotels. And since COVID became a problem, then we have hotels that have shut down. We have people working from home, and that has changed the attitude and job opportunities, especially in the hospitality business. However, there has been a slight growth, and it's a very small growth that I cannot call significant, and that has been for residential homes. For those who have properties with private gardens, we have seen a slight increase in interest of rehabilitative work for gardens because families now are starting to spend a little more time at home because families are working at home, people are working from home, so open space within the private context has become quite important. I must say also, we must look at the urban context. The uptake of landscape architectural services has been low because if we talk about the county, when it was Nairobi City Council, there were 4 positions that were available for landscape architects. But the government or the county now that we are talking about counties and sub-counties have not taken up landscape architects as part and parcel of their urban design and planning bodies or departments in each county. But we have seen an interest, and I will mention in my own experience, because we have had clients from counties, and that is basically the Nakuru County. We've seen it in Machakos, where they've actually developed a park. But you'll find that there's an interest in some of the counties, especially the larger counties like Nairobi. Nairobi is currently rehabilitating most of the pathways, pedestrian spines, but no landscape architects are really being used effectively. They have been used for road reserves, and we are aware that also we have had as a firm interest in highway design. That is in Mombasa, Nairobi, and Nakuru. And we expect that this will continue growing, especially because currently the Nairobi County has been very keen on developing pedestrian walkways, pedestrianized environments, and this is likely to trigger an interest in urban design environments where landscape architects may be used to actually develop parks, which has not happened. But urbanization in itself for landscape architects in this country will continue to increase in terms of interest because For example, there's the idea of affordable housing. We expect that landscape architects will get involved. We have seen it in Mombasa, we have seen it in Nairobi, I've seen it in Nakuru, and I'm basing this purely not on empirical quantitative information, but basically based on the experience we have had as a firm, that actually there is an interest and it's growing. But for the profession, in my opinion, in conclusion, for this to continue growing, we need to become more proactive at the political level, where we lobby for legitimization and a need to have registered landscape architects being involved in each and every project. One of the ways of doing this is the creation of an approvals department in each county for landscape architecture, because the profession cannot grow unless government demands. If the government has a demand for it, then that's the point at which where the government will first of all get landscape architects engaged at the county level. We'll start seeing a requirement for landscape architectural design and approvals, regardless of whether we are dealing with urban contexts, residential contexts, commercial contexts, so that we are now going to develop a new profession where the demand is expected at the planning level. Just like we have architectural approvals, engineering, landscape must be placed within the context of government requirement for development. Then the profession may grow. I talk about growth because it's the only way. It has to become a government-driven need, as opposed to private enterprise-driven need. And this is what has been happening so far. We have seen an interest even in government at the level of institutional development at, for example, universities and government institutions. We are starting to see a situation where when advertisements or RFPs are put out where they say we require an architect, an engineer, a quantity surveyor, a landscape architect. This 10, 15 years ago was an unusual thing to see in adverts where landscape architects are actually being requested for. In the private market, there has been an advent where part of selling residential property or gated communities, the word landscaped gardens has become a selling call for properties today. And this is the development that I say we are starting to see, that developers are starting to appreciate the idea of landscape. And currently, some of the hospitality environments and even residentials have started bringing in more specialized sort of landscape implementation, where we are seeing now vertical gardens becoming the norm, especially for commercial buildings and residential and hospitality. I can say we are also seeing artistic sculptural works becoming part of landscape through what I would call hard landscape requirements. And that is where I would say that the profession or the state of the profession is at. Of course, we are too far away from what I'll say, for example, from South Africa or even Europe or the US in terms of growth. There has been some growth, but I think it could be faster when it becomes taken up by government institutions to make it a requirement. Otherwise, we need to have also a code of ethics developed so that there is control One of the problems, and it's important to talk about some of the problems that have arisen out of the profession growing, is that probity, ethics are now only guided by individual practice. That is, each individual must be able to stay within the bounds of what would be considered as ethical and moral for the profession's growth and upkeep. This is one of the biggest areas that I think, in terms of the practice of landscape architecture in the region and in Kenya, is a problem, because we have no controls on behavior and practice of people who are practicing in the field, because that responsibility is entirely left to the individual landscape architect to stay within the bounds of morality and ethics. And that needs to be taken up by our own chapter and the Architectural Association of Kenya, to actually see that legislation is put in place to control the services that are provided, to control the conduct and behavior of professionals, and to strengthen the landscape architectural body to discipline and keep the practice on what we'd call on a professional bounds. That is one of the biggest dangers that I think the profession is faced with at the moment, because there are no specifications, there are no controls on how people practice. Although I must say that recently I was involved in developing a code of practice for the construction industry in Kenya. We're still in the process of carrying that out, and hopefully this will go a long way towards at least specifying specifications for the construction industry. And in conclusion, I think landscape architecture in this country has a great future, not only in the country, but also at the regional level, because once the government embraces the use of landscape architects, especially for environmental conservation, for urban design, our cities are growing. As a result of the devolved sort of governments, we are starting to see an advent of new urban spaces, new urban environments developing. But unfortunately, I must say that it is not happening with the input of landscape architects at the moment. But I do see a possibility which must come from the profession itself becoming proactive and actually showcasing the need for landscape architects at the new devolved governments that are all developing urban environments and capitals or headquarters of administrative headquarters that are actually pulling populations and urban development into each of the counties that exist. The fact that we are talking about currently about the 15% that is disbursed to each county, and it's likely, should the so-called BBI go through, to go to 35%, means that we are likely to have a lot more devolved development of urban space. But we need to place ourselves, I hope I've not taken too much time. Am I within time, Ruth?
Kindly wind up.
Yeah. And I'm actually winding up to say that the future for landscape architects in this country belong to a proactive profession that demands to be seen by the devolved governments. I believe that's where this profession can grow significantly, because all the urban spaces that are growing at the devolved level do not have landscape architects giving substantial urban design, urban planning within the context of these very fast growing urban spaces. Also, the fact that we have the devolved governments, there is the opportunity for conservation at landscape level, for urban open space development, for recreation, and also conservation. And with that, then I think we have a bright future, but the future does not belong to us if we are not proactive in developing the industry. I think at the moment, landscape architects in this country are expecting that the government will develop it for them. But I believe that we need to become visible. We need to become proactive. It's the only way. Otherwise, there'll be no real development or a visible contribution by landscape architects in the future, unless we become proactive and demand legislation that actually requires the input of landscape architects. I must thank you all for giving me the privilege and the opportunity to discuss the profession of landscape architecture in this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for that interesting presentation on where we are at as a profession. I will quickly introduce Louise. I'll quickly introduce Anel Ladin, who is a landscape architect and a partner at Landskapslaget in Stockholm, who will give a reflection on a brief reflection on what landscape architect Karaoke has presented. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Robert, for the very interesting reflection you had on the development of the landscape profession. It was really interesting to hear, and it was also interesting to during your talk reflect back on the same journey, which I believe has been made in Sweden, although we have perhaps 30 more years in our profession. And you talked about how it takes time for a formal profession to take off, and the need of finding a common ground in order to, I believe, both exchange skills and also be accepted as a professional body. And I recognize that in our profession as well, and in my work. And I remember when my colleagues started our company in 1973, they were a bit different in the way that they were starting as generalists, as you talked about, not designing small landscape, but wanting to take a larger grip on things and looking on development in a larger scale. And I think it's really interesting also and important when working on larger scale projects, as you mentioned, to being able to be a pure consultant and being able to work more specialized with landscape and allows special skills to develop within the profession. And what we see a lot of here in Stockholm is a lot of large scale urban developments and the need to collaborate with other competencies as well in order to create those solutions that are needed to handle the challenges of today. And you also talked about the need for legislation and the need for common approaches, I think, which we also have been working for during the past years, and which I think is an issue that is always very, very important, and also the need to exchange knowledge between landscape architects in order to develop new skills and learn from each other and learn about new techniques. Especially today, when we are dealing with the challenge of sustainable solutions and projects are being more and more complex, we need to take in a lot of different perspectives in the work. And what we see a lot of today here is that the landscape architect is quite often a coordinator in projects, trying to handle and coordinate lots of other different competencies. And in doing this, one needs to be both a generalist, I think, and also specialists, and especially needs to collaborate a lot with other people. And I believe, as you said, that the future for landscape architects, both here and where you are, is to be a proactive profession. And I think that's actually the core and the key to create solutions that can meet the demands of today's challenges, regardless, I think, of where you are in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anneli. So far, we've had quite an interesting discussion on where the profession is at and where to move to. I would like to ask all our participants, if you have any feedback or question, you can type it in the Q&A tab. You can also participate in our survey. I think we've posted a question in the chat, which you can just answer to that. Then we shall give the results at the end of the webinar. Our next presenter is Hitesh. Hitesh Mehta is a landscape architect. He's an architect and he's an environmental planner. He was part of the team that founded the landscape chapter together with Prof and Robert, and he was the first secretary of the chapter. He has consulted in over 65 countries and worked in over 6 continents, and is a fellow in various organizations. His firm, HM Design, works on environmentally and social-friendly projects, and he currently has projects in Nepal, Sierra Leone, Mexico, among other countries. He has also worked on climate action and poverty alleviation projects, and was the recipient of the United Nations Outstanding Achievement Award for his work in alleviating poverty and protecting sensitive ecosystems. So Hitesh will talk to us about professional association. He's also a delegate to IFLA, and he will take us through on how to build each other as a profession and how to build the chapter and the continued growth. Karibu Hitesh.
Asante Ruth, hamjambo to all my Kenyan colleagues. Good morning to my colleague in Colombia, Gloria, and good afternoon to colleagues in Nigeria, friends, and also in Sweden. So I'm going to share my screen. Great. So there we go. 1 second. Can you see my screen? Ruth, can you see the screen?
Yes, we can. Yes.
We're talking about the landscape architects is on 5 different things: the history, I'll talk about the achievements, the challenges, the opportunities, and the actions. So it was almost 31 years ago that 4 or 5 landscape architects got together and had a little cocktail party right during Christmas time, and started talking about, you know, how to form the landscape architects chapter. The first meeting was held a month after that, and Melanie Richards, who is in that photograph, who has already been mentioned by both Robert and Philip, she became the interim chairperson, and then later on, it was decided that just a few months after that, that Robert Karaoke and Frederick Rutenhaus should be the ones who should represent the landscape architects in the governing council. So the feedback we got at the time was that to start a chapter, we needed landscape architects and architects to be committed and to become the first members. And we had 10 of us. 5 of us were qualified landscape architects, and the others were architects. So this is when the chapter began, 1991. And I must, at this point, recognize the just stupendous efforts of Robert, who was just presented, who was the chairman for 18 years, from 91 to 2009. He also was very active with the AAK, was the vice secretary at one time, and then later on became the chairman of the Africa Committee of the IFLA Central Region. In those days, Africa was placed with Europe as part of the IFLA Central Region, and it was underneath Europe. And later on, Robert was also been an external examiner from 2005 to 2019. So you can see that as far as the chapter is concerned, Robert is our true champion. Achievements go, we have now had 6 IFLA Africa forums on landscape architecture education. They started as education, but now has become education and practice. So it is the premier conference for Africans. And you can see that the Landscape Architects chapter of Kenya has been the leader. It organized the first conference way back in 1994, and then another one in 2011, and then in 2015. So 50% of all the forums held in Africa are by the Kenyan Landscape Architects chapter. Now you might wonder, why is it that there is,
Hitesh,
yeah.
Just a minute. Please put slideshow. We are seeing many slides at once.
Okay, just a second.
Yeah.
Can you see it now?
Yes, just continue.
Okay, sorry. There? Is that fine?
Yes, yes, much better.
Okay, good. Thanks. So you know, when you talk about the differences, IFLA with the help of Mr. Zui Miller were very interested in starting a program of landscape architecture in Kenya, a master's program. And so they helped us organize a conference in 1994. But unfortunately, between 94 and 2008, there was not much activity going on because we were under Europe and we were sort of the little brother, and nothing really happened. And it was in 2008 that with the help of James Taylor, who was at that time the head of the education department at section at IFLA, that there was some kind of impetus place. So we had a conference in Dubai, a seminar where Kenya Landscape Architects chapter was very well attended. And the whole idea was, how do we get a IFLA Africa region started? And that's when in 2011, the Kenyan Landscape Architects chapter took the baton, organized, which is probably still the most successful IFLA Africa conference. And this had the first committee that was set up. We also organized a students competition at that time. And it was a great time to sort of connect. You know, in Africa, every village in Kenya, we have a chief, and he's also our elder. And in our case, Professor Gunjiri is our elder. So it's always great to connect and then talk about the chapter and the profession. And in 2015, again, we held another forum, and we'll soon find out, not find out, but we're also holding the 2023 forum. We are now beginning as a chapter to start getting involved internationally. And we currently have a dynamic group of committee members. You can see here Ofafa and Wanza in Tunisia, which was the last forum that took place. In terms of the chapter, we participating at the world region quite a bit in a very strong way. I would say probably the most active, I would say, in Black Africa in terms of participation. This is in Turin at the World Congress. Again, an opportunity to meet up with other African members. This was in Montreal about 4 years ago. And we have currently got a fearless leader, Fafa, who has really got a good group of people together and very dynamic. So they have now been able to get other people, other landscape architects in Kenya. And because of funding, particularly, we have not been able to attend international congresses, but this is changing. So we have had the largest participation of Kenyans in the world in congresses, and that took place in Singapore. And an opportunity to get to see what others are doing around the world. Most recently, the Kenyan Landscape Architects chapter went to Sweden at their Oyster conference. And of course, you can see here, the cold was not something they were expecting. So this is another interesting experiences. And this is when, the meeting started taking place. They were taken forward regarding this joint Congress of Kenya and Sweden in 2023. The Landscape Architects chapter in Kenya has been, internationally has been very active as well. We have now been the keynote, we have given the keynote addresses at several conferences. This is way back in 2001 in Costa Rica, recently in Argentina. And we've also been very active and the co-founders of the Landscape Architects Without Borders. We were co-chairmen for a while, and this one is in Turin. We are now, the chapter is running professional exams. Sorry, if I can go back. And, so regarding, from progression from graduate members to corporate members, Karaoke also just mentioned about corporate members. And we are looking at, trying to see how we can get architects to start beginning to employ, corporate members. In terms of membership, it's just amazing, from just 5 qualified members, we are now to almost 181 members. And we are now, with the professional examinations, the idea is to have more of the graduate members to become corporate members, to try and get the student members to eventually become graduate members and sort of start building this up. We have now 3 fellows out of, I think, about 25 to 30 fellows, Architects Association. So, you can see the chapter level, the landscape architects are going strong. We have, of course, over time, faced a lot of different challenges. There is a lack of interest from landscape architects, because of various issues. But as Robert has said, this is definitely improving. Funding is always an issue in Kenya, but we are hoping that post-COVID things get better. And the chapter has always fallen under the Architects Association of Kenya. We are about 6 or 7 professions, and has always had low visibility. But we are seeing over the last 7-8 years, and especially now under the leadership of Mujeri agenda, that we are getting this visibility. They are totally on board with the landscape architects. And you can see from the 2023 World Congress and this particular seminar and webinar that this support is increasing. In terms of opportunities, the chapter is the best vehicle to reach out to the legislature and to come out with laws to govern landscape architecture in Kenya. So as Robert has said, we are looking at trying to get the legislature for the landscape architects to become a legal profession. There are, of course, business opportunities for members as people become more qualified, they become more authentic, they become more disciplined, and the idea is to get the profession out there. The idea eventually, of course, is an opportunity is to get an online newsletter going so we can get all of these students and technicians and gardeners and everybody together and really build the profession. And of course, relationships with international landscape architecture associations. This one with Sweden has been going very well. And the idea will be to see how we can now start building these associations with our brothers in West Africa, South Africa, the US, Colombia, etc. And finally, actions, where we, with the COVID times, we are beginning to start getting stronger and smarter, and we have already a very strong, vibrant 2022 planned, and our when it comes to working with the stakeholders and finding solutions, especially when it regards climate change. This is one of our big pushes. And in terms of membership, we really are trying to figure out ways to get the students to get more involved and to become involved, and for the graduate members to try to push them to become corporate members. So there are lots of opportunities, and these are the actions that we are looking at taking. Trying to get a mandatory continued professional development amongst members is important for us, and this is some of the actions that we are planning on taking. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to end up here. I think a lot of other issues have been covered by Robert. So just wanted to thank, on behalf of the Landscape Architects chapter, I wanted to thank the Swedish, our Swedish brothers and sisters for your trust and your respect, and for us to join together and do something nobody has before done at IFLA. And we as the Landscape Architects chapter are very committed in connecting with our brothers and sisters around the world, and in putting forward what Africa can do, because this is landscape architecture started. It started in Africa 3 billion years ago, and we really want in 2023 to show to the world that we are now taking that profession to a whole new level. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tesh. That was quite interesting. It's good to see you managed to fish some photos we didn't know you had. I'd like to call upon our Swedish counterpart, Joran Lindeberg, who is a landscape architect and is also the chair of the landscape, I don't know, there's a chapter of the Architect Sweden. So it's quite an interesting coincidence that even in Sweden, the architects and the landscape architects are in one organization. So I'd like to just invite him to just give us a brief perspective on what the Swedish situation is and what we can learn. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Hitesh Mehta. It was very inspirational to hear you talk. Very good to see a lot of happy pictures with all these beautiful people. I would say, I would start with history. I think it's very good that you make a very good history where you're coming from and where you're heading for. I think I get inspiration for this because I think we are lacking a little bit of this in Sweden. We have a longer history, but I think we often forget our history. And it's very, very important really to know what people have done before us and what we are heading. So that was a good inspiration. And I'm going to be quite short, but I'm so happy with this collaboration between Kenya and Sweden. And as you're finished, this is going to show the world that this is a new stage we are going in to really to have this close collaboration. And I think the technique we got and we learned so much the last year how we could communicate in quite new ways. And when I look at the perspective in Sweden, I think in our chapter, we try really to have a lot of activities with our members now and using the new technology. That's very important for us. And that's a really big challenge for us, how to get our members in activities, because we are like 2,500 members. But the chapter, we are 9 persons, and sometimes you can get the feeling that we are working in our own group, but it's so hard to get our message out and get the inspiration. But we try to have seminars, and we have the seminars in different parts of Sweden, and that's a way to get people engaged and get into the activities we are working with. And so I'm very, very happy. I think I'm just so glad that we have this meeting, that seminar, and it's so important that we share our different views and things like that. So I think I'm ending. I'm going to be very, very short, actually, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Joran.
Thank you.
So I'd like to move on to our final presenter, urban designer, and she's going to be talking to us about working in the public sector and how landscape architects can be more effective in that space, and how to position ourselves and just how to engage better with government and government agencies. Welcome, Brenda. Brenda?
Thank you, Ruth. So I work for the county government of Kiambu, and I've worked here for 6 years now, since the year 2015. And Kiambu County was one of the first counties to engage a landscape architect. So I'm aware that the national government already had some working for them, but I'm sure they were grappling with challenges which I'm sure all of us can relate to, having landscape architecture as a very young profession. So my task really is to outline the role of landscape architects in the public service in Kenya and look at some of the ways we can influence government projects and our level of influence in government projects, as well as how we can incorporate public participation in landscape planning. And finally, have a look at positioning the profession on impacting and having an impact on public policy. So as I've mentioned, really no one prepares you for public service. There is literally no roadmap, especially in new departments where you're a one-man, or rather you're running a one-man department, which is the case I found myself in, as well as many other colleagues who have now been adopted into government. So it's a case of learning on the job and also consulting with other counterparts in other departments. And most recently, I think in the recent years, a lot of government institutions have been involving their own in-house landscape architects, which I think is a really good move on our side as a country, because we're realizing the need of having landscape architects involved. So when it comes to our involvement, I could say it's still minimal, but there's a bit of growth and uptick. We see other professionals trying to understand our role and also giving us a space to practice, but it has also come with a lot of lobbying and putting yourself forward and also, you know, arguing a case for the profession. So we find that most of the times, especially in government, we have to guide the process because a lot of our colleagues don't really understand our role. So we have to guide the process, and a lot of times we have to counter propose some of the projects by professionally, rather by putting ourselves in a position where we are able to take the reins and show them how or what landscape architecture really is. Because most of the times I think we have generally failed in that area. We come under the shadow of maybe the architects or the engineers, and again that doesn't always augur well with the practice. So it's been a lot of lobbying, and with time they see the need for the profession and also the practice. So the beauty of public service is that you get involved in a lot of projects, a lot of different projects. There's a whole diversity of what you could be involved in. It's endless, and as much as it's endless, the challenges are also endless. So it ranges from site planning, master planning, and most of our projects have to do with parks and gardens. Of late, there's been a lot of advocacy for non-motorized transport facilities, which I'm really happy to see taking shape, especially in the in Nairobi CBD and in other counties as well. Especially Kiambu County has taken that up as a challenge. So we're also involved in institutional designs such as schools, hospitals, markets as well. Departmental offices in government. There's been a need and a growth in, or rather they've expressed the need for having landscape architects on board. We've also been involved in some rehabilitation and reclamation projects such as dump sites and landfills, as well as wetlands. So that is very encouraging. As I said, the public service is full of a range of projects. Sometimes you'll find yourself in a slaughterhouse, designing for them. You'll find yourself, you know, in a nursery school. So it's quite exciting, and I think we are taking steps in the right direction. In terms of influence, I think Jan Gell is the one who said that cultures may be different all over the world, but people are the same. So it's from practice I've found that if you provide good spaces, people will gather. If you provide good spaces, people will want to use them. So our level of influence on government projects is dependent largely on the scope, and also our involvement is determined by whether that project is purely a landscape planning or landscape architecture project, or landscape architecture is an element in that project. So there's been also a good approach to forming design teams where a landscape architect is now part of the team. And from there, I think we have continued to grow, and happy to see that also other counties are seeing the need in involving landscape architects. So in terms of public participation, the one thing that has continued to change and improve participation is the collaboration we are having with different institutions that already implement this as a standard. So in government, it's a standard to have the public participating, but sometimes that is highly overlooked. So having collaborative efforts or collaborating with other institutions who have this as a standard requirement has really largely helped us to also implement the same on our side. So especially working with private institutions or where institutions which probably are giving us grants, they have really helped and trained the government officials to follow certain protocols, which we have again carried out consecutively in our project. So that has been also a part of the growth we are seeing. Then in terms of public participation, there's been also a rise in the prioritization of land use with the scarce resources we are seeing. It's been very important to keep investigating what's important at every point and what's more important at a broader scope as opposed to just having one project. Again, in terms of participation, we try to involve different persons, starting from the directly affected persons by the project, moving on to the closely affected people and the general public by holding citizen fora, which is also a requirement. In this fora, different stakeholders can give their opinions and also their needs, because they're the people on the ground and they understand the social and environmental needs better. So this also helps us and assures us of support from the public, and the people end up owning the projects because they feel like they are a part of it, and really they are a part of it. And I think on the public side, they also get to hold us accountable to how we use the resources and how we manage our project timelines. And in a way, they can also conduct their citizen audits as the projects are going on. Then finally, as we look at some of the challenges or areas of implementation or improvement we might need to continue working on, I think the top thing is budgeting. A lot of times landscape works within projects and in government are under budgeted, or rather they're not well budgeted for, and the resources are very limited, and it appears either as a provisional sum or they're the first part of the contract to suffer some budget cuts in case part of the contract runs low on funds. So I think that's an area we really need to lobby for, and a challenge to all the landscape architects in government to make sure that the budgets are either well done, or in terms of before contracting, that they're well looked into and that they're efficient and sufficient. Then the other part is involvement. A lot of times you find that landscape architects will come in when the project is already running, and you end up doing, like first aid work as opposed to being thoroughly involved in the project. So I think that's also another part we really need to continue advocating for. And also the interdisciplinary approaches we've been seeing across the world. I think it's something we really need to continue advocating for in the country, such that we just don't do designs or we don't run projects in isolation of other professionals, especially in highly demanding projects. For example, if it's a wetland, we need wetland reclamation or development, we really need to include people who are key in such projects. Finally, also the approach we take sometimes could be very local, and when we avoid looking at the project from the bigger urban fabric. So I think it's a really important thing for us to consider approaching projects from an urbanism point of view, as opposed to a local intervention. Again, the capacity that governments have needs to continually be built up through trainings, collaborations, and In terms of contracting, we really need to grow, or rather encourage landscape architects who have specialized in the building part to involve themselves in the tendering processes, because sometimes you have a vision, but the reality is not achieved because you don't have specialized contractors on the ground. Finally, on post-contract maintenance and continuity of the projects, we also need to continue looking at that, where once projects are done, they need to be maintained well. There also needs to be a conversation around the continuity. In case the project was phased out, we need to make sure that the phasing continues and the budget allocated for that is taken care of. Then I think in terms of public policy and our influence on this, we need to continue negotiating space use, because a lot of times the conversation will be around the fact that there is no public space, or rather we can't have sellers or traders on our streets at certain times. Yet this is a really, this is a big part of our community. So we really need to look into social innovation, and we need to also be tactical in the way we approach our planning. Either we plan and we move from paper and actually go onto the ground to see how these needs can be well accommodated in our projects and in our designs. So I think we need to be open to the efforts of others to occupy the spaces we create, and also address the social and environmental needs in our designs. Yeah, so I think that's where I'll wind up, and I'll be open to more questions as we continue. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Brenda. That was quite interesting, just to see how to negotiate the public space and how to give our inputs into in that space. So just a quick one, I'd like to ask all participants to just bear with us. We may go over the time by a few minutes. So just bear with us on that, so that we are able to complete the program. So I'd like to call upon landscape architect Lars, who works in the City Development Department of Stockholm. He's a landscape architect and has worked in many public space developments, and has been working in this space since the mid-80s. So just to give his perspective on public sector. Welcome, Lars. You're muted. Kindly unmute.
I thought it was okay. Thank you, Ruth, and thank you, Brenda. First, I was going to say that very much of the experience you have, Brenda, in your work is similar to things we work with in Stockholm. I will just make a short reflection here and have some perspective from Sweden regarding a few of your keynotes in your speech. In Stockholm, we are about 60 or 70, I think, landscape architects working in the municipality in different roles and in different departments. So we've come a long way since the 70s, and the roles are very different, and it's very different to work in different departments. Once this started, I shall not make a history here, just very, very short. Once the landscape architect started to work in municipalities and in the public service, it was very, our task was very narrow, and the design and investigations were made in-house by ourselves very much. And the change has been tremendous, because nowadays our tasks are extremely wide and therefore very complicated. And we are now a client organization, so we order consultants We work with a lot of consultants. And in my apartment, that's called, I have to look where it's what is called in English, City Development Department. We work with new developments, mainly on land owned by the city itself. Here, our role is very special because we work as advisors. It's very clear that we are advisors. I should just try to find something here that I wrote. But the ones that take the decisions often listen to us. They have a lot of trust in us. But it's a delicate situation because we need to have their trust. Overall decisions are made by politicians, but the lower we get, then decisions are taken in the city's own organizations. So it's very special situation, the thing that's happened also from a situation from the 1780s where we had a very narrow task. Now, when we're everywhere, we work in different positions and roles, and some had chief positions, and we are specialists, etc. That's also what happens here is that we are very much more. It's a more competitive situation. It's a lot of competitions between different specialists in different fields, and it's very good, but it's tough. And I think it's many of our issues that we work with are also more and more important and more and more recognized, and that also increases the competition within the organization. I just wanted to give you a very, very short, brief picture of what happens when you are more under competition and that your task has been more wide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lars. So we had some few questions. Today we are going to launch an online directory that has not all, but some Kenyan projects, which we'll be doing after the Q&A session. So we have a few questions in the Q&A session. So I would just like to call upon, there's a question about the link between landscape architecture and conservation. So I would ask Hitesh to handle that. Where does landscape architecture and conservation converge? And then there's a question on how the green infrastructure or nature-based solutions going in Kenya. So I would ask Brenda, now that you work in public policy, and this question is, how does the government handle this? So Brenda, you'll handle that question, please. And then there's a question on what are the common issues regarding landscape between Sweden and Kenya? So I would request one of the Swedish panelists to take this up. Anel, you could handle that question, please. So kindly, Hitesh.
Yes, thank you, Oswald, for your question. Landscape architecture is a profession of stewardship. It is our responsibility to take care of the planet in any form, whether it's an urban situation or in rural areas. And so conservation is at the core of this profession. And a lot of the work that our office does, and I know quite a few of the landscape architects do, conservation is huge, especially in a place like Kenya, where we have huge swaths of land, with just very and a lot of endemic vegetation, native wildlife species, and I think we are a very important profession in that case of trying to look into ways of sustaining that landscape, ensuring that the local communities that are around it are benefiting from that place. So I would say really important profession when it comes to conservation.
Thank you, Hitesh. Brenda?
Thank you, Ruth. I think there's been a growth in nature-based solutions in Kenya in the recent years, and a lot of people are getting more conversant with the procedures, and also as a way of curbing some of the issues you're facing in urban areas. A lot of people are going towards green infrastructure and nature-based solutions, as the question had asked. However, I think I'll concentrate on the government part. In my government, there's been talk of actually having this at planning level and approvals level, but we've not really escalated that and seen it through. There's been talk on imposing, or rather insisting on, a number of green roofs in every hectares. There's also been a lot of encouragement of people to go towards waste management that is sustainable. So I think a lot of people are still familiarizing themselves with this, but at government level, we are implementing some of this in our projects, but we would hope that we have this at approvals level, where we can now harmonize citywide, we can have this at citywide levels as opposed to smaller projects. So I think a lot has been going on privately, but government is definitely interested, and they've been doing their best and conducting trainings at smaller levels, or rather lower levels, and we really hope to escalate that. So I can confirm that there's a lot of talk and conversation on that and plans, but I think now we need to also get working. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Anil?
I think there are probably a lot of common issues regarding landscape between Kenya and Sweden. I think one of the main challenges probably is about asking the right questions in order to be able to create the right solution. And I think that requires quite often to keep a holistic approach and collaborate with a lot of different people to see beyond your own barriers of your own competence and take in a lot of other people's competence as well in order to broaden your view. And I think that might be, it sounds very easy and sometimes it can be, but I think it's also a challenge that one needs to consider in all kinds of projects, regardless of scale, probably. And I think in that also, as Robert was referring to, I think it's being a proactive profession. A lot of it lies in being able to collaborate with other people to develop landscape architects as a profession and a competence that can deal with creating a more sustainable future, basically, and making projects contribute in an efficient way to that.
Okay, thank you, Anil. So now to our final bit. So you'll just give us another maybe maximum 10 minutes to just finish this. So I'll call upon Carol Wanza, who is also a landscape architect and urban planner. She's the Education and Academic Affairs head at IFLA Africa, and she's also a lecturer at Jomo Kenyatta University. So she's been working together with Pia and together they've been able to document various landscape projects in Kenya. And she's just going to give us a brief description of what that has been and where the documents have been uploaded so that we can all view it at our own time and to be good for case studies in future. So without further ado, Carol, welcome.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, my colleagues, and also those ones whom we work together with, one of landscape architects. It's very encouraging to see this happening. We've been waiting for it to happen for a very long time, and it's finally here. Mine is very, very simple, and as directed by my moderator, it's to introduce you to our platform, an online platform that we have started to showcase what landscape architects in Kenya are doing. And probably a similar one is going to be uploaded for Architects Sweden. I am an urban designer and a landscape architect, just a slight correction. And I have been privileged to actually be sort of like the link between academia and practitioners in my country, as I am also the industrial coordinator at our department in JKUAT. So I get to interact a lot with students and practitioners and collect a lot of data and feedback on what we are actually doing from the classroom to the ground, and able to sort of bring back that information to something tangible that we can work on and keep on improving our profession as we go along. I have also been privileged to work with my team from IFLA Africa, starting with our president, Carrie Duncan, our honorable secretary, Graham Young, Maimuna Kabal, and Ikram from Tunisia. And of course, our delegate, Hitesh Mehta. It's been a fantastic team. And together, we are actually working towards strengthening our ties from the classroom to practice, and also to link what we do in our region with what the rest of the world is doing. So at the end of the day, we're actually having something, that is similar across the globe. So I'll go ahead and showcase where our projects are uploaded. I must say we are very grateful to Union from Sweden for having collaborated with us and sponsored the collection of data and uploading of this project. And everybody can actually be able to see what we have been doing, what we're up to. It's a small start, but it's a small start towards a big dream, a big step. I know a lot of our students have been asking why we don't have, case studies within our country rather. And every time they need to look for case studies, they always have to go through the internet from, the developed world to see what other landscape architects are doing around the globe. So this is good news to all of us, to our students, faculty, to our colleagues, and everybody out there to actually see what we can do and what we have been up to. Alina is going to post, Lina is going to share the link in the chat, so everybody can actually have that link, can see it. From here, you're going to have the same link posted across all our networks so that we are able to keep on seeing what we have been doing. And once you get here, you're free to actually explore what we have. We call it Emergent Interaction as the main thing, because we are looking at new ways of doing things where we can actually be, here, you're there, and we are together doing this together, and we are doing, we are able to see what we can collaborate on. We have the page starting from a word starting with a word from our president. And then we actually, you're able to see what the initiative is about. You will be able to meet our, landscape architects from Kenya. From here, it's actually an exciting page. You will be able to sample and see what we have actually been doing and been talking about, because I know today has been a lot of theory. So we've all been saying we need to see what's, the practice out there is. And of course, the collaboration has been said is between us and Architects Sweden. You'll be able to read and see what we are up to. We will keep you updated. And we will not forget to mention our partners, that is IFLA World, UN Habitat, and then of course a thank you note and from us, to our sponsors, that is Union to Union. In here, just a quick one. You can actually explore what some of the landscape architects have done. You're able to see a presentation of the different projects that we have, sample, and we encourage you to keep on looking because you need to know and see what we have actually been doing from this side. It's exciting. From there, you can be able to see the name of the project, where it is located, when it was completed, and who the landscape architects were, and the key items or elements within that particular project. So I will not preempt everything because I want you to get into the page and see. You'll be able to see also some of the interviews carried out, and you'll get to meet in person the people who've done these works. Some are based here, some are based outside the country. Some are still continuing students and who are having their further studies in other countries. So I would say you're all welcome to explore with us, work with us. And for those countries that have been there, done that for a long time, we call upon your collaboration as well, so that we can do this together and we can make landscape architecture great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wanza. That's quite an interesting website. I hope we'll all take some time to go through and see what, as landscape architects, we've been up to. So I'd just like to thank all our panelists for giving us interesting presentations. And for the final remarks, I'll call Pia to give the closing remarks, as well as a vote of thanks for all the attendees and for the interesting afternoon we've had. Welcome, Pia. Just to introduce Pia. Pia is a landscape architect, and she has worked in both Kenya and Sweden. She's also the IFLA delegate for Sweden and has a great interest in collaboration internationally. And currently, she's the project lead for Architects Sweden, and she's been working together with the AAK team on the IFLA World Congress 2023, and also in planning this webinar. Welcome, Pia.
Thank you very much. It's been so exciting to follow, and also to see this second episode with the Kenyan focus from the first episode which had the Swedish focus. And I know we're also working to get to know each other, and it's very much to understand or maybe broaden up our view of the world. And to know, we tend to sit in our country and we see what we do locally, but also to see it in a global perspective. And we also, especially now when we have a lot of global challenges with climate change and so on. We are very excited, and as also a representative from Architects Sweden, this is a very unique collaboration to have a joint World Congress that this also will end up in 2023. So yeah, I would like to thank all panelists and everyone who worked with this, both from AAK and from Architects Sweden. I know it's a lot of work, and I'm also very fascinated how we can be able to organize this while we have never met, or many of us have never met before. And I think that's a good, it's a good sign that we can just continue to collaborate across borders. So thank you very much. And I know there will be a third joint episode coming up. There is no date set yet, but we will keep you posted on that. And yeah, thank you very much again.
Thank you, Pia, and thank you, everybody. We hope you've had an interesting afternoon. You've learned something, and we hope that we'll see you in the next webinar, which we shall communicate through our communication channels. And we also want to thank AAK, the Secretariat, for helping us and for just being with, providing the support needed to get this going. And so just like to say thank to the panelists. Thank you very much. It was quite an informative discussion. I hope I did not cut off.
Oh, no, we heard the last bit.
You had the last bit.
Oh yes,
sorry.
The thank you, but maybe that's a thank you and see you soon.
Okay, sorry, I think my internet had a problem. I was just saying thank you, everybody, and we hope to see you in the next webinar and other upcoming collaboration events. And we hope that this partnership will last. It will not just be up to 2023, but it will go beyond that. Yeah. So thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Basic.